What's up, everybody? Welcome to the November 10th, 2025 IndiView Weekly Market Update. I'm Jeremy Bryan, and this is powered by Indie Wealth. Today, we're going to get right into the hot button issues because we got a few going on. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the U.S. government shutdown. We've reached the longest shutdown ever. So that's not great, but it does seem, and the market as of Monday here today, does seem to be pricing in a little bit of a return. There was some over the weekend. There seemed to be a little bit of levee breaking with regard to some compromise of deals that we may get this thing back going again. I'll wait until it actually happens. I'm not as convinced. It's certainly possible that we could get back up and running, but it does not sound like the healthcare subsidies are part of the package, and so that could derail any type of agreement we have at this point right now. I've been reading, PIMCO does excellent government reporting work, Libby Cantrell there, and I've been reading her pieces that said there was a lot of pressure with regard to coming together before Thanksgiving. There were a couple of things that were coming up, military pay and other things that were suggesting that around this time, actually probably a little later, she was suggesting, but around this time there would be more pressure to come together and actually get a deal done. Could absolutely happen. Again, I'm leaning on more towards the side of skepticism until I actually see it done. But we are starting to see some of the impacts on this. We don't have government data, right? So we don't know what, with regard to government statistics on CPI and jobs and all that fun stuff. We don't have as much in that. But consumer sentiment is frankly, in the toilet right now. It's about as low as it gets from the side of the economy. I think the government shutdown has a lot to do with that. Secondarily, the components of flights. And flights, from my perspective, obviously it has a problem from if people don't want to fly for whatever reason, whether that's capacity or whether that's concerns of safety, whatever that may be. If people don't want to fly, then it doesn't tend to go away immediately. Now, again, if we get the shutdown done and taken care of, I think this is short-term in nature. But the longer we go and the more convinced that people are that maybe they don't want to take the flights that they're taking, that can have a dramatic impact on the economy. Because if we're not traveling, then we're not doing discretionary spending as much. Maybe we transition some of that, but a lot of that maybe just, hey, I'll save that until later. I don't know what's going on in the job environment right now anyway, so maybe I'll just hold off. There can be some of that, and we're starting to see those level of impacts. The SNAP impacts, obviously, for the lower end income component is a real threat. So there are things that probably get them more likely to get to the table. But again, from my side, I'm just having a skewed optimism to see if this actually gets done or not. Turning to another K-shaped data point today, Apollo came out with a research piece that showed wage growth among stratification levels from high-end income to mid-tier to lower tier to lowest tier. Why I said this is another K-shaped data point is the lowest tier income growth rate is growing at the slowest level of everyone. So from a side of not only, I think that's the area of concentration and job loss, I would say somewhat mid-tier management is probably feeling a little bit of the strain too. So they would probably fall into the middle to upper tier quartile. But just general daily workers too, and your lowest income, they're the ones most affected by job sentiment, job loss. And they're also the ones that probably don't have as much exposure to the stock market and the things that are going on from asset growth going forward. They don't benefit as much. Much of their wealth comes from the checks that they earn, and they're just not growing as fast. So it's just another data point that we are feeling a little bit of this K-shaped economy where those at the high end continue to have high levels of wage growth, continue to grow, and also their portfolios are growing because asset growth has been going on, while this middle to low tier is feeling the strain of very expensive housing, rental prices are going up, healthcare costs are going up, and their wages aren't growing as fast. And so I know Josh Brown had a piece on this the other day, which I thought was interesting too. Just understanding that this can have some ramifications and that this split is probably not extraordinarily healthy. There's always going to be ebbs and flows in that, but this level of magnitude of transition of the working, what's working for some, not working for others, isn't terribly healthy over a longer period of time. And so that's why I'm talking about this K-shaped economy so often, is it's something I'm paying a lot of attention to see if there are some disruptions as a result of this, whether that's political, whether that's anything. You just can't have this level of, people having great levels of success while others are really struggling. Turning to 3, healthcare and staples on a tough streak I put here. That tough streak is very simply over the last 3 years, so 23 and 24 and most of 25 here, if we ended today, healthcare and staples would have underperformed each of those years. Both of those sectors have underperformed the overall market during that period of time, and somewhat substantially. So really how I look at that is sector composition of the S&P 500. I mean, obviously you can look at performance and it's underperformed, but to get a sense of the magnitude of underperformance, in 2022, at the end of 2022, healthcare and staples comprised over 27% of the S&P 500. So together they were quite large, almost as large as technology at that time. Turning to right now, again, at the end of the month, healthcare and staples were around 15% of the overall index. So their positioning with regard to, again, the S&P 500 is a market-weighted index. So the bigger you are in the index, and therefore the more magnitude you have for the performance of the S&P 500. Well, healthcare and staples used to be very important to the S&P 500's overall performance, but now subsequently, since they've had such underperformance and it becomes so much smaller, they're not as important as they used to be. Again, being a very concentrated market, especially concentrated in AI and technology, that makes some sense, right? Is that everything else has to get smaller because all those AI and tech companies are getting so much bigger. It is pretty surprising in how much these are different. And especially for somebody like me who advocates for holding a diversified portfolio, I actually like healthcare and staples here at these levels. I think their relative to the market position is relatively cheap. They're still growing. Now, are they growing at the levels of these AI companies? Absolutely not. But there still are opportunities in both of these sectors. And I think just getting rid of them to have that passive exposure in the S&P 500 leads you to potentially having, if this were to roll over, again, healthcare and staples are considered a little bit more defensive overall. And so if that were to happen, you could face some underperformance as a result. So I think there's still advocacy for holding both of these sectors. I understand they're much smaller than they used to be. I understand that they do have some problems, but there are some really good companies in both of these things, and I don't think they should be ignored completely. Turning lastly to the personal side, I live in Minnesota, for those of you that don't know, and today I drive my kid to school during the day. And so this morning I drove to a dusting of snow on the ground. And that one caught me a little bit. I was like, oh, all right, we're in that time. Again, I don't know. I live here. I've lived here almost my whole life. I shouldn't be surprised by this. It's early November. It does happen here. But still, every time I see it, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I should change my mentality to waiting for the snow to fall now at this point. Again, right now I'm in the honeymoon phase. This isn't that bad. Hey, a little dusting of snow. It looks pretty. White everywhere, a little gloss of white. There's a chill in the air, but it's not freezing yet. Talk to me again in middle January. You're going to hear a very different story. That snow is on the ground. It's so cold. Why do I live here? That kind of stuff. And then talk to me again in April when we've experienced a little bit of warmth. And then we have that subsequent snowfall that happens every year where we get a sense we're coming out of it, and then we get blanketed by snow again. That's when the real depression sets in. But right now I'm in the honeymoon phase of winter, a little bit of flurries. And again, this is my kind of weather where it's a little bit chilly in the morning and it's decent enough in the afternoon to do stuff. So I like it. I'm good right now. Talk to me again in a couple months. You're going to hear a very different story. So that's all I have this week. Tune in next week where we'll have our next hot button topics. Until then, please take care and thank you.